After 3 years as roommates, my husband revealed he's gay and had a boyfriend. A mutual breakup led to an unexpected proposal. Please hear me out. The situation is not as dire as it may seem. I feel quite adrift and am in urgent need of guidance and support. Additionally, I am using a throwaway account because I do not want anyone to recognize me here. My husband, 30 years old, male, and I, 28 years old, female, have been married for almost 4 years. We both hail from very conservative families and entered into an arranged marriage after delaying the conversation about it for an extended period. We had our reasons. I wanted to concentrate on my career, and you will understand shortly. After being pressured for too long, we decided to meet and discuss our situation. Initially, we both wished to end things and agreed to do so during our first date, leading both sets of parents on a wild goose chase before breaking things off later to gain some time away from talks of marriage. However, as we spent more time together, we discovered more commonalities than we expected, prompting us to choose marriage instead. As introverts, finding someone with whom we could comfortably share silence felt like a true blessing. We got married and began living together. There was some adjustment for both of us, and since we understood from the beginning that intimacy was not on the table, I, due to some past experiences, required my personal space, so we agreed to have separate rooms. Our parents lived far away, so this arrangement was not problematic. Essentially, it was a roommate situation, one in which we were legally married. It's amusing. We used to refer to one another as my government-assigned husband and my government-assigned wife. About a month and a half into our marriage, he confided in me that he is actually gay and has been in a long-term relationship with a boyfriend. To be frank, I felt somewhat hurt, not entirely sure why. Perhaps I had begun to develop feelings for him, or maybe I wanted him to be more candid with me. It wasn't as if I would have declined the marriage, but I completely understood his position. Both of our families are extremely religious and strict, which contributes to the challenging relationship I have with my own parents. I comprehend that revealing such a deep secret to practically a stranger is a significant risk, yet I believed we had built a foundation of honesty from the start, which makes it feel unfair. Ugh, I'm digressing. In any case, we talked about it, and he broke down in tears. I reassured him that it was acceptable, that I understood, and that I was fine with him being with his partner as long as it remained under our parents' radar. Eventually, I met his boyfriend, also 30 years old, male. Let's name him A, and upon realizing that it was actually my husband's best man at our wedding, I felt tears welling up at the thought of how devastating that day must have been for both of them. They had been college sweethearts, and from the first interaction, I could see the depth of their love and care for one another. Their relationship was not overly public, yet it was genuinely sweet. They always made an effort not to spend personal time together in our home or in my presence to avoid making me uncomfortable. Both were very respectful and ensured I never felt lonely or excluded. A is a kind and respectful person. Along with my husband, he has given me gifts and flowers on Valentine's Day and for my birthdays. We were not the closest of friends, but our relationship was quite cordial. Following that initial phase, we established a peaceful routine. I must say that the subsequent 3 years were undoubtedly the best of my life. I had all the time and freedom to pursue my interests without the constant scrutiny of my family and relatives. Plus, I gained a fantastic roommate and best friend for whom I would not trade anything. Although my husband and I lived together, sometimes we would go grocery shopping or watch movies or series at home when our schedules aligned. We had long, meaningful conversations about various topics, sharing our personal lives, fears, and frustrations about our families. He is an avid gamer and used to refer to me as Sadie to his Arthur, which I found really sweet. While I am not an avid gamer, we both enjoyed watching animated films or series together. We even rewatched Avatar, The Last Airbender, after which he began saying I was the Katara to his Zuko, because he also has a scar on his face from a childhood dog accident. He feels a bit insecure about it, but I find it gives him a charming, boyish quality. He also encouraged me to explore dating and even offered to set me up with someone from his circle if I was interested. His close friends were all aware of his relationship with A, so it was perfectly fine. However, I honestly never felt the need. Growing up in a religious household, where people constantly pressured me to be pious left a lasting impact. By the time I reached adulthood, the idea of being in a relationship no longer seemed essential. I had become extremely self-sufficient, which was also one reason I hesitated about marriage and struggled with sharing personal space. Things were genuinely much worse, but that would require an entirely separate post. Returning to my narrative, everything was fine until it wasn't. My husband and his boyfriend broke up last summer. It was a mutual decision. I was surprised because they had been together for quite a while and seemed like a lovely couple, but my husband explained that they felt a growing distance and eventually fell out of love. I had indeed noted the emotional distance. My husband had received 2 promotions in recent years, resulting in 2 transfers to different branches. We moved once right after our marriage and again a year and a half later. I was unaffected by the moves since I primarily worked from home, but my husband and I periodically struggled with the distance. Naturally, I was not privy to their personal matters, as we respected each other's boundaries, but it was evident that the constant commuting was taking a toll on them. We aimed to stay close by. However, it was unfeasible for it to move near us due to his own job. I thought they would manage it like any couple eventually does. Then one week, my husband seemed down and eventually revealed that he and I had broken up. My husband was initially sad, but gradually he returned to his normal self. Our relationship remained the same as always. A few weeks ago, while we were lounging on the couch and discussing our families, griping about how both our mothers have been pressing me for 2 years about starting a family, he suggested that I could tell them he has fertility issues to alleviate the pressure. We attempted this during the next family dinner, but it spectacularly backfired. Before we knew it, both of us were being practically dragged to the doctor's office for infertility tests, which ultimately revealed that we were both perfectly healthy. After a 2-hour lecture from our angry parents about our childish prank and the need to grow up, we returned home. To seek comfort from the harrowing experience, we decided to cuddle on the couch since I was emotionally drained and had cried on the way back. In the midst of our conversation, my husband suggested that we should perhaps give our relationship a shot. I felt unsure. Neither then nor now can I articulate my feelings. My mind feels numb. It isn't a repulsive idea. My husband is handsome, intelligent, and exceedingly kind and understanding. He and I both earn well and share a strong rapport, making him genuinely my soulmate and best friend. Nevertheless, I am uncertain if I really wish to pursue that kind of relationship with him. I don't believe I am asexual for various reasons, but it's complicated. We have never been physically intimate for obvious reasons. The most physical contact we share is comforting hugs during tough times and an occasional kiss on the cheek or forehead when warranted. I worry that if I try to force myself into a deeper relationship, I might eventually love him in that way too, and we could establish a family together. However, I question whether those feelings would genuinely be heartfelt. We rarely argue or fight, but for the past 2 weeks, there has been a stagnation in our home that feels suffocating. I find myself crying myself to sleep nightly due to the confusion. I feel utterly lost. We are both awkward around each other, and I detest it. I miss when he used to give me forehead kisses before important meetings. He once saw my best friend do it and teased me about it. Eventually, I explained that it was a practice my mother had instilled in me during childhood, so I often ask someone for a good luck forehead kiss before significant events. He started doing it for me, and I would joke about him being a softie. I long for that comfort we once shared. I am at a loss for whom to confide in about this without jeopardizing the peace we have finally achieved in our lives. I do not want to leave him. He has his own abandonment issues from past experiences, which makes me worry he might leave me someday, a thought that causes me immense pain. I feel so lost and confused and truly do not know what to do or how to navigate this situation. Please offer some advice, and please be gentle, as I have been a complete mess for these past few weeks. Story 2. A decade-long friendship ended when my guest disrespected my space, interrupted my show, and yelled at me in my own home. Hello, everyone. I have quite a story to share, so this will be lengthy. A summary is provided at the end. Recently, a nearly decade-long friendship went south, and I feel the need to express my frustrations. I am a 22-year-old female, and my friend Brandon, a 20-year-old male, has been my friend since the start of high school. For context, I currently reside with my husband many states away from my hometown. Brandon has previously visited us for a weekend, but this time he stayed for an entire week. During his last visit, everything went smoothly, and my husband and I were eager to welcome him again. The build-up, from the very first full day of his visit, things started to go wrong. I have a close relationship with my neighbors, and when Brandon met the neighbor I am closest with, he decided to invite her over to our house that evening without seeking my permission. At that moment, I was next door helping my other neighbors, so I was unaware of his conversation with her. He casually informed me that he had invited her over, displaying no embarrassment and behaving as if his actions were completely normal and acceptable. This was not an isolated incident. He repeated this behavior 3 times during his stay. He frequently pressured us into going out and spending money, despite our clear communication that our budget was tight. He made his boredom and dissatisfaction evident, making it our issue even when the weather was severe with ice, snow, and sleet, resulting in most places being closed and the roads being dangerous. One night, he left in the middle of the night to meet a stranger at a hotel without informing either my husband or me about his whereabouts. I woke up at midnight needing to use the bathroom, only to find him missing, and did not receive any explanation until the following morning. One of the outings he proposed involved alcohol, which is problematic since he is underage. I expressed my discomfort due to our past issues surrounding this matter. I tried to discourage him and made my feelings explicitly clear, yet he once again disregarded my concerns, and we went anyway. I should mention that the car he used during that week was a rental registered under my name and insurance. There was no way I would allow him to drive 2 towns over in icy conditions to drink underage alone. Fortunately, nothing went wrong during that outing. Speaking of alcohol, one night while we were drinking at my house, if he was going to drink, I preferred it to be done responsibly with us. He failed to inform my husband that, instead of pouring 1 bottle of the drink into his glass, he poured 2. As a result, rather than consuming the 3 drinks he believed he was having, he unknowingly drank the equivalent of 6. These were large glasses, making it difficult to realize there was more liquid than usual. My husband had clearly stated beforehand that he did not wish to get drunk since he needed to wake up early the next day. Brandon ignored this, and it was only after my husband was quite intoxicated that he let us know what he had done. To say we were extremely angry would be an understatement. Additionally, on another occasion, Brandon thought it would be funny to suggest lacing our drinks with laxatives to see what might happen. The significant incident, that Friday was Brandon's last full day in my state. Unfortunately, I had to work, and by the end of the day, I felt overwhelmed and irrationally angry. I communicated these feelings to both Brandon and my husband, requesting a little time to watch my show without interruptions. However, that simple request seemed too much for Brandon. He proceeded to interrupt my show several times to share irrelevant information, always adding, "I'm sorry I disturbed you." No, he wasn't truly sorry. After dinner, he announced again that he had invited my neighbor over. That was fine, I could overlook it. I started watching a show, and neither Brandon nor my neighbor was paying attention. My favorite part was about to air, so I asked my neighbor to focus on this segment, as it was significant to our life situation. It was a comedy special. She agreed, and I rewound it a bit for her. At that moment, Brandon chose to loudly call out to my husband from across the room, causing me to feel infuriated. He was fully aware I had rewound the show and that I had asked them to pay attention. I was seething. Feeling overstimulated and already irritated, I hushed him and had what I refer to as my little autistic freakout. Please don't criticize. I am on the spectrum and can poke fun at myself. Brandon sat back, pulling out his phone to text my husband. I know this because my husband was sitting next to me and I could see his screen. I glanced at Brandon, and this is how the exchange went, as best as I can remember. Brandon: "Oh, I'm sorry, you got upset at me for talking, so I'm texting. Texting isn't talking." Me, speechless for a moment. I'm not angry. Brandon: "It's fine, I just won't say anything for the rest of the night." He dramatically turned back to the TV. I had nothing to say and continued watching the show. Several more frustrating incidents, unrelated to Brandon, occurred in the following minutes, and eventually, I stated I was going to bed and retreated to my room. I closed my door and turned off my light. This detail is important. Less than 10 minutes later, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Assuming it was my husband, I turned off my phone and looked towards the door expectantly. Brandon barged into my room and began yelling at me. Remember, I had previously communicated my feelings. Who knows what emotional state I might have been in. I was undressing and was barely wearing anything under my pajamas. Fortunately, I was still dressed, sitting on my bed and watching TikToks. He accused me of ruining his last night, claiming I embarrassed him and that my neighbor was so humiliated by me that she left. He insisted that I should have composed myself and resolved matters with my husband later instead of storming off like a child. I admit that retreating to my room might have seemed childish, but it is my home, and I will behave as I see fit. I shouted at him to leave. He disregarded my request and continued yelling. I had to shout even louder that this was my house before he finally exited, slamming the door shut behind him. I texted a mutual friend in a state of panic, and she came to pick me up. Aftermath. I poured out everything to my friend and had a long phone call with my husband discussing everything Brandon had done throughout the week and the incident in my bedroom. My husband, who had been drinking, endured a bit of a verbal barrage from me, but that's a different story. My husband confronted Brandon for invading my space, and Brandon sent me a message to apologize, which consisted of a non-apology followed by him making it all about himself. I responded with a lengthy paragraph outlining my feelings, but he ignored it. He left me on read for 3 hours and finally replied with more attempts to shift the focus onto himself without addressing my concerns. Brandon subsequently tried to reach out to my neighbor, asking if he could stay with her for the night. She ignored him as well. While Brandon was attempting to mend things with me, he was simultaneously telling my husband that he would contact the police if we did not return the rental car on time. Ultimately, Brandon called an Uber and booked a hotel. My friend brought me home, and we engaged in a lengthy conversation with my husband. The next morning, my neighbor texted me, inquiring if I was okay. I informed her that I was not, and we had a substantial discussion on the porch with my husband about the previous night's events. She had never been angry with me. She just assumed I needed some space as I had previously shared my mental state with her, and knowing me well, she recognized it was time for her to depart without holding me accountable. Apparently, Brandon had texted her that morning, asking if she wanted to have lunch with him. She ignored that invitation as well. Brandon sent me a message asking if I wanted to see him before he left. I declined. He followed up his previous text with a demand for me to notify him when the rental car was returned. I returned the car on schedule, informed him that it was taken care of, and we have not communicated since. Thank you for reading. I am deeply saddened that a decade of friendship ended in this manner, yet I cannot overlook all that transpired. My personal space was significantly violated, I was disrespected and yelled at in my own home, and he made both me and my friends uncomfortable. Summary: my best friend of 10 years stayed with me for a week, significantly crossed my boundaries, and is no longer my friend. Story 3. Potentially met the one, but the big age gap makes me question the feasibility of the relationship. Approximately 5 months ago, I, female, 19 years old, encountered someone male, 28 years old, after I made the decision to schedule a tattoo with him. For the purposes of this post, I will refer to him as Jay. Upon our initial meeting, I felt an immediate and intense attraction to him. I was unsure of how he would appear or behave, but he turned out to be the very embodiment of my ideal type. As we began to converse more, I discovered that we shared numerous interests: music, television shows, media, personal style, values, humor, and more. We talked for hours during the lengthy tattoo session, and eventually, the subject of age came up. I was quite taken aback to find out he was 28. While I don't consider that old, especially when making comparisons, I was nevertheless surprised because I didn't perceive any substantial differences in our personalities during our interactions. In fact, we seemed remarkably compatible. Once that session concluded, we parted ways as is customary, but I quickly arranged to book another tattoo. This one was larger and required approximately 3 relatively long sessions. Throughout those sessions, we communicated on a deeper level, learned a significant amount about one another, and shared plenty of enjoyable moments and conversations. It felt so natural with him. At this juncture, I was acutely aware of my attraction to Jay, but I didn't believe pursuing anything was practical due to our age difference. I assumed he would not regard me in a romantic way because of my youth. When the tattoo was finally finished, I felt a sense of closeness to him. We had connected in a profound way, and it is exceedingly rare for me to develop such strong feelings for someone. I paid for the tattoo and presented him with a small Funko Pop doll of one of his favorite characters as a token of my appreciation, and it was also close to Christmas. He received it very well and even gave me a brief hug. That evening, I left thinking I wouldn't really interact with him for a while, but that just didn't seem right. In the following days, I made several subtle efforts to communicate with him. We exchanged memes for a little while, and then transitioned into a conversation, those types of text exchanges that effortlessly flow and cover everything and anything. I don't know how it happened, but before long, he invited me over. Strangely, I still believed this would likely be a platonic encounter because I was doubtful that the age difference wouldn't be a deal-breaker. He mentioned that I was welcome to come play with his cats and try out some exciting games he owned that I wanted to check out, which made it seem like a casual invitation. Regardless, I went over, and everything began quite normally. I explored all his interesting belongings and played with the cats, having a great time. We settled down to play a game on his console and started off at opposite ends of the couch. As the evening wore on, we gradually moved closer, and after a few hours had passed, he finally asked if I would be willing to move closer to him. At that moment, we began cuddling, and I could hardly believe it. My heart was racing. I realized this might sound silly, but I truly did not expect him to reciprocate my feelings. If it makes sense, he seems like the type of person who would avoid anything socially ambiguous in this situation. Nonetheless, we began kissing, and eventually, we became intimate in the bedroom. Afterward, we promptly discussed the age difference. He admitted that he felt an initial attraction toward me but hesitated to pursue it due to our age gap, and I confessed I had felt the same way. It was challenging because he had never been involved with anyone significantly younger, and I had never been with someone considerably older, so we were both trying to comprehend the situation. We have come to the conclusion that, despite our uncertainty regarding the dynamic, we both feel such a strong fondness for each other that it merits taking things slowly and investing time to explore our feelings and the potential for a relationship. It has now been 2 to 3 months since all of this occurred, and I am even more conflicted. I have strong feelings for him, deeply so. Additionally, I am quite selective, exceedingly selective. Although it is still too early to state anything definitively, I cannot deny that I feel the beginnings of love emerging. At the very least, the seed has been sown. He is, in many ways, my ideal partner. Being with him feels exceptionally right, and I never want to leave his side. He is kind and compassionate, and I genuinely feel he treats me as a man should treat a woman. At this stage, I could honestly say he is the type of person I would consider marrying, although, of course, that would take quite some time since I am very young, and I do not want to make any significant life decisions right now, as I am still in the process of establishing my future. About a week ago, he nearly ended our relationship because he felt guilty about being uncertain about whether this was the best situation for me long-term considering the age difference. However, after a day, he returned and expressed that he was genuinely unhappy with that choice and was content with being with me, albeit fearful of what the future holds. The primary issue here is that he is on a timeline to which I am not bound. Unsurprisingly, he is contemplating meeting someone with whom he could settle down and start a family. We have discussed this, and he really aims to have children by the time he is 35 due to concerns surrounding biological factors, such as sperm quality. I have done the calculations multiple times. By the time he would want to conceive, I would be around 24 to 25 years old. I cannot deny that is exceptionally young. Currently, I am in college and expect to graduate at 21 after 1 year. Naturally, my main priority presently is this objective and ensuring I can eventually secure employment that provides a stable income. Herein lies the dilemma. When I consider the possibility of building a life with him, it's not necessarily a definitive no. I am aware that I want a family eventually. However, I envision that occurring ideally between the ages of 27 and 33. Furthermore, if my life plans progress favorably, having secured a decent job and a few years to save for a house, Including the expenses involved in starting a family, I could see this becoming a viable option for me. However, I cannot fully know what the future holds, even if that is my current desire, right? Honestly, based on how I feel, it could go either way. There is certainly a scenario where I graduate, find a respectable job, and feel prepared to start that chapter of my life with Jay in my early 20s. While it may seem far-fetched, the way I feel about him and the clarity he brings to my future pathways leaves me uncertain. Ultimately, I intend to take my time with him in the coming months and carefully contemplate what I envision for my life and future. We have thoroughly discussed all these concerns and agreed that whatever the outcome, neither of us should feel compelled to compromise or sacrifice our genuine desires for the other. My life will change irrevocably if I pursue this future with him, particularly regarding children, so I find myself constantly reconsidering. My greatest fear is that I follow my heart now, and a few years down the line, I discover new information that leads me to realize I am not ready. The last thing I want is to waste his time when he has already expressed that he feels this is a critical period for him to start taking important steps. I certainly do not plan to make any hasty decisions anytime soon, but I would greatly appreciate insights from individuals on Reddit who have more experience with relationships, especially in these complicated circumstances. For those who married or had children in their early to mid-20s, was it worth it? Do you have any regrets? Those who let someone special go for these reasons, does the life you have now make you happy with your choice? I am seeking all the honest opinions I can receive. Thank you, everyone. Summary: by chance, I met the man of my dreams. The issue: I am a 19-year-old female and he is a 28-year-old male. I am concerned about establishing my career at present. He is contemplating settling down and starting a family within the next 6 years. I have strong feelings for him and could envision a future together, but I would still be quite young even after 6 years and might not be ready. I am unsure whether to pursue him further. Story 4. Aita looking for outside viewpoints, please. On my current struggle, I'm 56F, he's 60M partner. A sexual fantasy evolved into something we wanted in real life. But then, before we had the chance to try it in reality, everything backfired and snowballed into what may lead to our breakup. Aside from a 1.5-year hiatus due to the coronavirus pandemic, my partner and I have enjoyed a 7-year relationship that has been truly amazing, by far the best of my entire life, even though we are living apart because we reside in different cities. About 2 months ago, we experienced our first significant misunderstanding, which resulted in a great deal of emotional pain and uncertainty for both of us. Given our distance, we were unable to meet in person to resolve our issues. However, we do have plans to do so in a couple of weeks. I am not feeling particularly optimistic, though. Here is the adult content aspect. Over the years, my partner would occasionally tease me, initially with playful curiosity about possibly visiting a sex or swingers club, not to participate, but merely to observe. The first time he mentioned it, I was taken aback and stated that it wasn't for me. He could go if he wanted and just tell me about it afterward. This occurred early in our relationship when we were transitioning from friendship to romantic attraction. About a year later, he mentioned he knew of a place that wasn't actually a swingers club, but rather a nudist resort, and asked if I would be interested in going there. We had previously visited a nude beach and loved the experience, so I agreed. However, that was right when the COVID-19 pandemic began, causing such places to close down, and we never ended up going. As we waited for the years of COVID-19 to pass, we occasionally exchanged sexual fantasies through messaging. He introduced the idea of the sex club again, describing his imagination of how it might be. He had not yet visited such a place, so this was purely speculative. He vividly detailed scenarios involving a threesome or foursome with me and another guy, or him merely observing as I engaged in a threesome with 2 random men. Of course, he also shared a fantasy involving the 2 of us along with a random woman. I acknowledged that the idea aroused me, but I considered it strictly a fantasy and doubted I could ever do it in real life. When he brought it up again, he expressed that he was more excited than ever to try it and insisted that I would genuinely enjoy it if I could stop overthinking. Recognizing it must be significant for him, I agreed to at least accompany him to such a place to see what it was like, whether to observe or potentially engage in sexual activity while others watched. He left it at that, and we did not make any plans to attend since those venues remained closed. To clarify, I never initiated discussions about sexual club fantasies. It was always him. During a subsequent conversation about his threesome fantasies, I decided it might be acceptable, so I told him I would consider it for him, but only as a one-time experience. I also expressed my uncertainty, as the atmosphere there might feel too sleazy and off-putting. He assured me that a couple of his friends had been, and reported that while it was somewhat sleazy, it wasn't too extreme. On several occasions, he brought up the concept again, often leading up to it by first arousing me with ideas for the two of us to explore next time we were together, such as sex in a public location, or some light BDSM activities like tying each other up, something we have previously enjoyed. We would discuss those ideas, building each other's arousal until he would then interject his fantasies about the sex club. He would enthusiastically talk them up, and because I was already in a heightened state of arousal, I would get swept up in the excitement and once more agree to participate, primarily because he desired it so much. Then came the day he shared another fantasy, this time a gangbang, though he clarified that it was just a fantasy and not for real life. I told him I wasn't comfortable with that and preferred something more like a threesome in which he was an active participant. He replied, "Okay, write me how you'd like it." I crafted a scene involving him and two other men and included stimulating details, anticipating he would appreciate it. When I shared it with him, he initially loved it and expressed how joyful he was that I wanted this, claiming he was so turned on he could explode, even engaging in masturbation on his couch after reading it. That excited me as well. He then inquired about my favorite part of the scene, and I told him it was the moment when he was fingering me and instructing me to lie down while another guy began to have sex with me. I was aroused, and for a moment, we just enjoyed the fantasy together. However, he then remarked that he thought I was enjoying it a bit too much and speculated that it was something I would pursue even without him. I firmly stated that was not the case. The main reason I considered it was because it was clearly a strong desire for him. He accepted my response. He then posed a question. Let's say you have to choose one of these options, only one, and after you choose, you cannot switch to the other. The next time you come here, we go to that place and make this fantasy a reality. B. Continue visiting me the way you have and engage in ordinary activities. I responded that I would choose B, unless option A also meant I could keep visiting him like always and engage in regular activities. That was the tipping point. He suddenly withdrew and became somewhat defensive. He exclaimed, "Well, that makes sense. Now I know you don't truly love me. This relationship is nothing but lust for you." That led to a heated argument in which I insisted he was mistaken, and I assured him of my genuine love. He insisted my choice spoke otherwise, stating, "It's clear that option A is your priority." I explained that I only hesitated about it because I was aware of his desire for it. He accused me, saying, "No, you want it for yourself and more than I do and not for me. I can tell." All of this occurred via text, so we were limited to words. There were no facial expressions or body language to provide context. I expressed my intention to call him, but he refused. I attempted to reach him anyway, but he didn't answer, informing me instead that he had to run an errand, and our conversation ended. I gave him some time to cool down for a couple of days before reaching out again. When he responded, he was still unhappy and had clearly not calmed down. He expressed feelings of betrayal over my choice of A. We debated our perspectives, and I repeatedly communicated that I was confused and hurt. He expressed that he felt shocked and betrayed. Eventually, he suggested that we take a break from communicating until we both felt more like ourselves. When we resumed our conversations, he had calmed down somewhat but informed me that he had lost feelings for me. He said he still liked me, but he no longer trusted me and viewed me as someone who only cared about sex and not someone who genuinely loved him. I was devastated. Since then, we have had several more discussions, most of which have involved me defending myself and more disagreements. At one point, I asked him if he had any desire to work through this and rekindle the feelings he once had for me. His response was anger, as he felt I was diminishing his value by determining whether I wanted to see him based on whether he liked me or loved me. He exclaimed, So friendship isn't sufficient for you. However, what I meant to convey was that I would still want to see him even if all he desired was friendship, but it would make me sad. This brings us to our current situation, except for our plans to finally meet in person to discuss everything. Yet, he cautioned me not to get my hopes up. This entire experience has been so surreal, I can hardly believe it's happening. Especially considering that during our 7 years together, we have never had significant arguments, just some differences in opinion, but nothing as serious as this. To anyone who has read through this lengthy recounting, you deserve recognition for your patience. I would greatly appreciate any analysis of his state of mind, as well as any advice, suggestions, or feedback you may have. Even if I am at fault in this situation, I want to understand it. Thank you. Story 5. At 22, I realized I've been a burden. After suicidal attempts and medication struggles, I became grateful yet regretful. I became tired of fighting. Hello, I truly do not know where to share this or how to begin. However, I felt the need to express my thoughts before making a decision about my future. I apologize for any incoherence or typing mistakes, as I may not be in the best frame of mind. I am a 22-year-old residing in the southwestern United States. I share my life with my boyfriend of 4 years and do not have any family in this state. He is not abusive or anything of that nature. In fact, he has been the greatest blessing in my life, and I am sincerely thankful for having met him. But I will elaborate on that shortly. Over the past month, I have come to understand how fortunate I am to have the life I do. However, I have also realized what a disappointing person I have been throughout it. So many revelations have arisen regarding the detrimental situations I have created but never addressed, mainly because I was too afraid. I have always fled from conflicts and avoided taking responsibility for them until now. Growing up, I came from a decent family, though it was not a functional one. I do not blame my family in the slightest, as we have developed a supportive dynamic over time. However, at the age of 11, I was diagnosed with severe depression. I often acted out in erratic ways, feeling miserable about every aspect of my life, and I would victimize myself at every opportunity, causing my family to suffer as a result. That was when I first attempted to take my own life. I took sleeping pills but panicked at the last moment and called my mother, terrifying her with that phone call. I recall her rushing home, forcing me to vomit, taking a cold shower, and making me stay awake until I could no longer. I woke up to her relieved expression. That was the first attempt. The next occurred when I was nearly 12 and had a disagreement with her about school-related issues. In my anger, I remember her saying, "You will never do anything about it, so be quiet." Out of spite, I ran upstairs and she followed, but I had already locked the door. I climbed out of my window from our 2-story house, hurrying to the roof. She injured herself trying to catch me being a heavier woman. I remember the police, ambulance, and even a fire truck being called to help me. Everyone was trying to persuade me to come down, but eventually, the firefighters arrived on the roof, and I felt cornered. I made the fateful decision to jump off. I lost consciousness, fractured my back, and sprained my ankle and wrist. I was admitted to a behavioral hospital in Arkansas for a month until I managed to convince my mother to take me home. Over the next few years, I was diagnosed with bipolar Roman II disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, anxiety, and eventually borderline personality disorder by the age of 22. During that time, I made 7 more attempts on my life, involving methods such as hanging myself, overdosing on prescribed medications, and attempting to cut into my veins. Miraculously, I was saved each time, whether by sheer coincidence or just plain carelessness. I wanted to speak out for once. Throughout my upbringing and even up to this point, I have always been reserved and quiet. When someone urged me to express my thoughts or emotions, I would shut down and remain silent. I want to apologize to those I have wronged in my life. To my dear friend M, who lent me money and then never heard from me again, I am truly sorry. I reached out late to repay my debt when I finally felt financially stable, but I was thrown out of work due to a ridiculous medication withdrawal. Unfortunately, by the time I tried to repay you, you had blocked me. I spent an entire month out of work because I could not function. I was going insane due to this. I experienced different episodes, ranging from severe paranoia to screaming at the top of my lungs and getting physical with anyone who approached me. banging my head against walls and floors. There were weeks when I felt completely broken and forgot how to breathe, to the point my boyfriend had to administer CPR to me. I detest being on all these medications. I truly do not know who I am at this point. Recently, I had to leave work again because another medication caused seizure-like episodes. I loathe this. I despise myself for being a burden to Brian and my family, and I am incredibly grateful to my boyfriend for standing by me until now. I have done the craziest things with him, which I now recognize. He does not have a social life because of me, even though I try to encourage him to pursue one. However, he knows that I will become depressed and spiral if I do not distract myself, as I have formed a severe attachment to him. I am delighted to have him in my life, yet I also feel pity for him for having me as a girlfriend. I have come to the realization that he may be growing tired of me. I can see it in the way he speaks to me, how he looks at me, and how he is slowly drifting away. If he finds this message, I want him to know that he is the best thing to have ever happened to me, and that will always remain true. I apologize for everything I have put you through, and you deserve to be happy with someone who can truly bring you joy. I sincerely apologize to everyone who has had to deal with me until now. Everyone has been so supportive, and I recognize that I am loved, cared for, and will be missed, but I am so exhausted from living this way. I have made the effort to engage in therapy, medications, dialectical behavior therapy skills, and attempt to go out, but I am so tired of reflecting on my mistakes. I have developed a harmful habit of yelling out, "I hate you," directed towards myself. I loathe myself. I feel foolish and will continue to believe all those negative things until my death. I am truly sorry that you have had to hear that, my love. I am tired of overthinking. I am weary of not having friends because I fear making mistakes that could cause me to lose them. I am fed up with being manic at work or home and being perceived as crazy because of it. I am simply tired. This message is not intended to elicit pity for me. I just needed to finally express what has been on my mind for the first time in my 22 years of life. It may be too late for me, but I wanted to raise awareness as well. You never know who is suffering in silence. They might have drifted away over time, be someone who is quiet, or someone who always appears cheerful. Always check in on your loved ones, especially if you know they are having a difficult time. Thank you for taking the time to listen.